Okay, anyway, so this session we're going to be talking about, helping companies create and capture value, and then, like I said, scaling current business models, and then what we're looking forward to with new business models. First, let's get some introductions so we can introduce the panel. We'll start with Chris, and give us on the end there, give us who you are, where you work, what you're looking forward to with 6G, and then what your concerns are between now and the time it comes to full standardization and commercialization.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chris Christou, Senior Vice President, Booz Allen, leading up a team under our CTO organization. One of our big focus areas is 5G and 6G. So, certainly excited by this event today. Some fabulous speakers here today, and I'll tell you from our perspective, there's so many features that are out there, and you look at the marketing literature that's out there from a lot of the vendors and the standards organization and the like. There's a lot out there, but what I'm really excited about is the potential to enhance the ecosystem of potential devices and use cases out of those. And in particular, it's more of that continuum from 5G with things like ambient IoT, NB-IoT, RedCap, to try to get those differentiated types of devices more than just your smartphone and tablet to connect to the network and create value and new use cases out of those. And as a result, really, I heard some other panelists previously talk about lower RAN and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, but you have this opportunity to really collapse the infrastructure required to support those use cases, and then connect those into, let's say, a digital twin to be able to really enhance your operation. So I think there's a lot to hit on in all of this, and really, but what really floats to the top from my perspective is that, and really that continuum from what we've seen developed here. Because in our deployment of our own networks, it's been really tough trying to get those devices and the device ecosystem to open up. In certain cases, the chipset manufacturers have them developed, but the OEM vendors don't have them implemented, right? So I think this will just continue to offer that opportunity to expand that. What am I most worried about? I think the ecosystem has to continue to evolve, and is just the upgradability of those networks. Like if a vendor were to come to us, and let's say for one of the private networks that we build, or even some of the internal R&D and development networks that we have, and said, all right, we're ready for 6G, hand me $10 million or whatever it might be, that's a big consideration, right? But it's really trying to get to more of that upgradability and integrating the new technologies as needed into the RAN, and then hopefully reusing some of what we've done with 5G with the core network, and really simplifying that transition, perhaps even more than what we saw from 4G to 5G.
That's how the sales process works at Booz Allen. You just
now we know.
We're ready for 6G. Hand me $10 million. No, thanks for that, Misha. You want to do your intro?
Yeah, my name is Misha Dola, and I lost my voice today, so I'll speak in a bit of a squeaky voice. So I'm vice president at a little engineering shop called Ericsson. I'm also sitting on the board of Ofcom, our UK regulator, and as well as on one of the tags of the FCC. So I'll start maybe about the things which worry me. Worry me about 6G. So one thing which worries me, and actually started to worry me even more today, is spectrum. So Commissioner Stark and Umer actually have not reassured me. So let's just be very clear here. No spectrum, no 6G, is as simple as that. So it is really a sufficient and a necessary condition for us to really bootstrap that new generation. So we need to get our act together and get that spectrum going. So that's number one, which worries me. Number two, which worries me, is that whole narrative around AI. I think we are overselling some of the capabilities of AI, what it can do in the network and for the network. And I think we are underselling a lot of what Gen AI and AI will do for the traffic going over the network. So I think we need to harmonize that narrative there. The third thing which really worries me is the cash flow of the operators, and not only the cash flow per se, but the imbalance of cash flow. And I see that in the UK, where we have one operator which is very healthy and another one which isn't. And of course, the market forces dictate acquisition, and the regulator says, no, you can't do it. So the entire ecosystem now is paralyzed. There's no sales, there's no densification of infrastructure happening. So therefore, you know, we kind of in a locked-in situation. But what am I excited about? So I'm very excited about, you know, that we will have 6G for, you know, will basically pay my salary for another 10 years, I think. So that's pretty good. We have ticked that. But seriously now, I'm excited about what I call the AAA. So I always talk about AAA bootstrapping, you know, our 6G networks. And the first A is AI. So this is all about efficiency, effectiveness. Think about the bottom line of your balance sheet, hugely important. The second A is API, and that is all about ability to scale, to build a platform business, think monetization. And Ericsson has made a real stake there. We just acquired a company for a mere $6 billion called Vonage to really get that industry going in that API direction. And the third A is AR, augmented reality. This is our new iPhone moment. Think 2008. We're going to hopefully have a new, whatever that device will be, augmented reality, maybe from Apple, maybe from Meta, maybe from somebody else, which really will bootstrap these new use cases and therefore get demand going, new demand, which we have not seen before. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, I like the idea of portable augmented reality. That's exciting to me, at both as a consumer and in professional life. And I do share your concern about waiting on Congress for anything really. But okay, Tyrell, let's start. Let's go to you.
Hey everybody, my name is Tyrell Junius. I'm the co-founder and COO at Xiaomi Networks. First, I'd like to thank Alex, Anthony, and the 6G team for the invitation. And it's an honor to be among some of the giant companies of wireless here today. So my startup, we're focused on integrated sensing and communications. We had some early deployments with the DoD, municipalities who are interested in smart cities, airport authorities who want to use 5G sensing for understanding and perceiving their environment in real time. So some of the things we're really excited about is around 6G is leveraging these new data insights and allowing operators, network operators, to monetize this data in real time to build other applications on top of that. Now, some things that we're really concerned about when it comes to 6G is around the complexity of 6G, or the complexity around 5G, excuse me. The complexity adds a lot of barriers for new entrants, and the complexity just adds on to more time going towards the deployments. And if we don't simplify 6G, we really see a potential another $1 trillion being spent and no revenue being realized.
Makes sense. So when you say complexity, it's too difficult to get into the 5G ecosystem, and you're worried that's going to continue over to 6G, or
not only that, also the actual architecture for 5G.
Okay.
Incorporating the RU with the CU and the DU, just making that more simple for 6G with an open system.
Okay. Yeah, open networks are definitely going to be part of the discussion. Stuart, why don't you give us your intro?
Well, I expected to be the leading skeptic here, but I wasn't going to suggest we're going to lose $1 trillion right off the bat. I'm the wireless CTO at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. We have a robust networking business. Know the enterprise very well. That's dominated by Wi-Fi, but we also have a nascent private cellular business as well. And I want to kind of set where I'm coming from in terms of who I talk to, who I care about, and what their problems are. And we'll talk about how they solve them later in the discussion. But I care about enterprises. And when I say enterprises, I do mean, but I don't really mean offshore oil drilling and nuclear power plants and deep mines. If there was some great technological solution that would solve absolutely every problem that those three vertical markets have, I would still not be at all interested in it. When I talk about industry, I'm talking about public school districts, about hospitals, about large public venues, stadiums, concert venues, about carpeted office spaces where most of us work, about university campuses, to a certain extent, multi-dwelling units. All of those entities have a network today. It's largely, the backbone of that is fixed, but the way that they reach the clients is primarily over Wi-Fi, and I'll just tell you, most of them are pretty happy with that, but they run up against certain obstacles. And so what I'm most interested when I think about what's a new technology, what are the problems that my customers have today with their existing networks that they don't think they're going to be able to solve. When I go back over and over again and say, oh yeah, you know, I know that's a problem, but I think you can solve it with Wi-Fi, and I've been back 5 times, and they say, you know, if you still want to continue this conversation, you need a better answer. So the kinds of questions that the problems that they have, they're pretty consistent, and they fall into basically 4 categories. One of them is about coverage, and these obstacles are not just things that Wi-Fi is failing to deliver, they're also things that the public cellular network is failing to deliver. Almost all of our customers have a dreadful indoor cellular coverage problem. There are questions about mobility. They would like for their existing networks to manage handovers well. They've got more and more client devices that are moving at faster than pedestrian spaces, whether those are AGVs or robots. They need to have a more deterministic network. Probably 90% of our customers have their Wi-Fi configured to do best effort background traffic, and that's all they do. That's great, as long as there's nothing that needs to be prioritized. And a lot of them, especially with public-facing networks, want segregation between the wild Wi-Fi world that all the visitors come in on and a protected world that's under their control. And the theme through all of that, so that if there's something I care about less than wireless and deep underground mines, it's mobile network operators. Our customers, when they say private cellular, it took me a long time to realize this, when they say private cellular, their emphasis is on private. They want a network that operates with certain characteristics of a cellular network under their control. And that leads me to a worry, which is also about spectrum, but I think spectrum probably from a different perspective. We've got a little bit of CBRS spectrum in the United States, but that's nowhere near going to meet the demand of private cellular networks if they were to actually take off.
Can't wait to buy this panel drinks later. So, you know, riffing off of that, let's thank you for that, and let's talk about enterprise business models. So, you know, as some of the earlier panels have already pointed out, you know, a lot of the things that enterprises do now can be adequately handled by, you know, 5G and even 4G. So what about 6G, or what network capabilities are going to, I guess, you know, not just do more than just improve their efficiency, but actually, you know, move them toward changing their business model or improving their business model? We could go in order, or we could just, you know, we could go in the same order we did before. Chris, go ahead.
And when you're saying about their business, like their own business model,
the enterprise business model, yeah, like how they're leveraging the network differently, or they network capabilities differently, or what is it doing? What do you see that could enrich, you know, the enterprise and help them, you know, create and capture more value for, you know?
So I think that what's interesting is that you see the telco world and what we're doing with 5G trying to move towards this more, we talk about cloudification and things like that, containerization of network functions. And I think that adopting some of those practices to the best extent that it's applicable, right, for a network that needs to have 5 nines, especially in the private or enterprise space, will be really, really important. And so what does that mean? The first one is that, hey, you know, now I have these containers that I manage as part of the network. I need to apply DevSecOps best practices and the types of best practices I have in managing my cloud platforms to that type of network. But more importantly is you see some members of the industry, Ericsson being one, some small companies like one we work with, Shibodi, as well as T-Mobile and other companies try to really enable that network API, that network programmability, and trying to get the app developers that are in the cloud using those cloud tools now be one of those other important APIs that they try gain access to, just like they would like an S3 API or an EC2, well, EC2 instance, but like other types of APIs that AWS or Azure offers them, now you have this network API, and you could really enable innovation in the application development space tied to those new types of devices that I mentioned earlier, and hopefully get that ecosystem. You know, listen, we keep citing some of the previous examples of where the network was really able to unlock a whole new industry, right? And you know, you had the things like or even before, the invention of the word processor, right? And we probably haven't seen a lot of productivity improvements since the old days of WordPerfect. Internet, then cellular, the initial cellular, and then 3G, 4G. It's hard to really see that transformation happen all that often, but I think that we'll continue to unlock value and continue to drive innovation out of these, you know, progressive improvements that we see from 5G to 6G and onwards.
Yeah, I think there's also a way, yeah, I guess a way enterprises view the network, you know, is not just something that delivers bandwidth, but, you know,
Yes.
but part of their value add, you know, to their customers. I think that could certainly be part of the overall equation.
Yep.
Misha, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the Fortune 1000 company composition, right, you see that about 40% is like white-collar enterprises. You know, these are office buildings. We're talking like Apple, Amazon, Salesforce. They're sitting by their desk or at home, whatever. You know, and I think these companies will continue worrying about what they're worrying about now, which is availability of services, whether this is Wi-Fi, fiber, 5G, doesn't really matter, security, and productivity of the workforce, right? And so I think we will see a further, you know, boost of fixed wireless access. Somebody mentioned that earlier. I think that was kind of a surprise killer use case in 5G, and I think it will continue killing in 6G. So, and then we have security, wide area networks and all that. But actually, if you pay attention, what was announced on stage by Mark Zuckerberg and Satya, that really caught my eyes. It was a few months ago. They're both on stage, and they carved out that partnership where they said, you know, in the future, you would come into your office and you put on VR headset and you work like in your private little office. And I thought this is a fantastic trade-off between working from home, where you got all your privacy and you can do what you want, versus, you know, going to the office, talking to a colleague and enjoying the really bad office coffee, right? So therefore, having this in one single go, I thought it's really attractive. And I actually work with my colleagues on this, and I can tell you, you can serve about 4 or 5 headsets with Wi-Fi, but you can't go beyond. So if once you have an office force, which is 10 people, 20 people, 100 people in an open space, you need 5G, private 5G above all. So this is where I think that will be one of the big enterprise use cases, in my opinion, which probably could latch on to this new device, new way of working. And anybody who has tried the Vision Pro will confirm that the experience is you know, nothing short of stunning, and it works out of the box with my Macintosh. I can just connect it, work right in there. So that's on that case. Then you have about 20% of company enterprises in the Fortune 1000, which is hospitals. I think Stuart had alluded to that. So these are companies who maybe want to use APIs and, you know, app developers to build new services. I think that's a very exciting opportunity. And in the 5G age, we are kind of prepping that. And then the last set is heavy industry. And surprising, we talk very little about this. And maybe, you know, you had alluded to that, you know, URLC was not a really useful use case in 5G. But I think it was just a prep work for what is coming. So I'm working now really 24/7 on the West Coast, and the only thing I'm dealing with is what I call D&D. So this is not Dungeons and Dragons, it's droids and drones and droids, okay? So it is really coming, and I think this will hit us very hard, and these are non-negotiable uplink data rates we have never seen before as an industry. And, you know, forget about anything what license exempt can do. This is only heavyweight 5G, FR1, FR2, and ideally FR3, all carrier aggregated to hit these data rates. And they cannot compress much because they have a service level agreement which they cannot violate simply because, these will be robots walking around in the building, in the manufacturing halls, in the street and all that. So I think there's a huge industry use case coming, which only 6G will be able to deliver. Heed my words. We'll see. Thank you.
Okay. I'm curious about the scenario you painted about the Vision Pro, or the sort of augmented reality, but at the office, sort of a thing. Because I have been thinking, I mean, for especially the Vision Pro, one thing I'm interested in is this idea of, they just kind of quietly snuck in a completely different, way of interacting with machines. That everyone sort of thought of it as like a gaming device or movies and whatnot, but it is a completely different way of collaborating with people if the network and the bandwidth support it. And I think that could be very interesting, and I think that's one of 6G's possibilities overall, is allowing people to creatively collaborate across distances, or even on projects where they have to bring in things that are more than what they could
And the interesting thing is, if you're home alone, or a family of 4, whatever, everybody having a Vision Pro or the augmented reality feature of that, you're good with Wi-Fi. Really, I don't think you really need 5G or 6G there. But the moment you go into outdoor settings, coffee shops, visiting your friend, or an enterprise or industry setting, this is where the telco ecosystem kicks in and needs to do more to support these use cases.
Can I just ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
In one of our early morning sessions, we talked about URLC, and I think they have a new name for it out of IT, the 2030 vision there.
Right.
And do you see that with D&D being deployed, that more of those URLC features and time-sensitive networking extensions that were defined in one of the releases becoming more integrated into the network?
Yeah, I think so. And D&D, the problem is it's not only very low latency, it's also very wide bandwidth. So we suddenly have a double whammy we need to deal with. And we still don't know really how to do it.
And the reliability.
And the reliability. Yeah, spot on.
Let's give our other panelists a chance to weigh in on what might change in the enterprise, especially as it relates to business models when we are taking advantage of 6G capabilities. Tyrell, you want to go?
Yeah, for enterprises, some of our early conversations has really been around using integrated sensing for camera-free asset tracking. You can track unmanned ground vehicles, forklifts, all without using a camera, no GPS, no LiDAR, no wide ultra-tag bands. And you can use this information in real time. You don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars deploying cameras across your network. You could just use your existing 5G infrastructure. Either you can co-locate it at the base station using our sensing algorithms to plug into your virtualized RAN, or we can be agnostic to the base station and put this between a base station and your target of interest. So enterprises can use this data in real time for retail and location intelligence, smart cities, understanding where different constituents are moving, also vehicle classification. These are some of the early case studies where we're gaining a lot of momentum early on. With the DoD, we're working with sensing for counter UAS. We can track drones up to 3 miles away. That level of range is constantly improving every day.
That's all without cameras.
That's all without cameras.
Okay, that's interesting, impressive. Yeah, and that could definitely be an asset to freight companies and militaries and that sort of thing. Stuart, 2 quick questions. First of all, to get your comment on the enterprise, and then second of all, how mad are you for making me wait until last to answer the question?
It's your panel, but I'd forgotten most of what I was going to say, except this part about WordPerfect that stuck in my head. I wrote my dissertation on WordPerfect, and I recall having to write it 8 pages at a time because the document.
Did you have to swap out the discs halfway through?
But I did my undergraduate thesis on an Olivetti that didn't have a working carriage return, so it definitely was something.
All right.
And I say that sort of to bring things down to earth. I was at a panel like this maybe 10 years ago, I think, in Copenhagen about 5G. And it was all about how enterprises were going to eat up 5G and they were not going to need Wi-Fi anymore. And here were the 3 or 4 things that they were going to do. FWA wasn't among them. That turned out, I think, in my opinion, to be the fallback use case when everything else failed, because there wasn't a single person in that conference, and I worked for a chip company at the time, representing the interests of the people who you thought was going to pay for all this stuff.
I agree.
So I think it's really important to keep that. And I just want to talk about 3 areas of concern. Okay, there are going to be more than 3. Spectrum. So I don't think anyone should be under the illusion that the success of 6G, or that 6G is going to succeed against anything if it fights on bandwidth and capacity. There is just no more cost. We've got 1.2 gigahertz of greenfield spectrum for Wi-Fi in the United States, and about half as much in most of the rest of the world. Don't put all your expectations into high bandwidth requirements. There are a lot of other requirements that are, I think, not met by Wi-Fi, but that's not one of them. We do need more spectrum for cellular-based technologies. And I think that having sort of non-guaranteed access to maybe 80 megahertz of spectrum for CBRS, it's a good model, but it's not going to be enough. And we need to be able to make that a global model. And I think there's a good reason to see that direction opening up, but it's not moving fast enough. And in RU, the 5G radio operating in 5 or 6 gigahertz in unlicensed spectrum, I used to be just very unhappy about that. But the more I see what our customers are looking for, which is a segregated network, a deterministic network, a network that handles fast handovers, we could do a lot of that in unlicensed spectrum as well as in dedicated spectrum. I wish that 3GPP would get up off of its butt and start seriously finishing the specification of NRU. And on the get off your butt 3GPP line, Wi-Fi integration has to come, because our customers are not getting rid of their Wi-Fi, and they're not getting rid of their fixed networks, and they're not going to learn how to operate a new network. They want to operate an integrated network. And this, what was it called, ATSSSS, didn't go anywhere, and I don't think that anyone who worked on it is happy with it, except for the ones who didn't want it to go anywhere. That needs to be picked up, and I don't know whether it's going to be done within the standards. I kind of doubt it, or whether it's going to be done in a proprietary way, as our companies once had a collaboration along these lines, I don't know, 10 years ago. It needs to be resolved. And then finally, the neutral host model. Now, this is something that we've been pushing with Wi-Fi. You have your cellular device, but it also supports Wi-Fi. You go into a place that doesn't have cellular coverage, you get on the Wi-Fi instead, you do Wi-Fi calling. That's helpful to a certain extent. We really like to be able to do the same thing with a private cellular network, and all the technical problems to solve that the building blocks are there. Operators in the United States have expressed an interest in doing that, have run some trials, but we haven't been able to get past the trial agreements with operators on that. Being able to really have recognizing that you've got all these enterprises that are willing to basically pay for your infrastructure indoors in buildings if you're just prepared to let your subscribers onto it. You've got to act on that. And then finally, the last thing that I'm concerned about is the lack of backward compatibility in the cellular world. So I think even operators who may have been enthusiastic about the idea of 5G were not so enthusiastic about having to replace the infrastructure that the cement wasn't even wet on the towers in order to support the new technology. And we can't run our business that way. We depend upon our customers being able to upgrade infrastructure and client devices independent of each other. And if by introducing a private 5G solution into the enterprise, we block them so that if they are going to upgrade that, they're going to also have to simultaneously upgrade all of the client ecosystem. That's going to just be a huge weight on the development of the business. And it's the single most important reason why we're not advocating for a combined Wi-Fi access point and cellular G-Node B. Because we got to solve that backward compatibility problem, or else it's just too expensive to move to a new generation.
Yep.
Before we go on and talk about network operator business models and what might change there, let's open it up for questions. I don't want to wait to the very end before we are a little more interactive. Does anyone have any questions about enterprise business models or anything that the panel said so far? Yes, ma'am.
growth along with that exponential data growth. So I'm wondering where you think everybody else is always talking about new revenues. I'm still trying to figure out exactly where those are coming from other than fixed wireless access.
Is that in the in an enterprise setting, or is that in a public 5G, 6G
Public
setting?
operator.
Operator setting, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think the problem for operators is they need both, or they want both. They don't want their consumer business to not grow, but they want more from enterprise than they've been getting, and 5G hasn't gotten us there yet. And now we're talking about even more demand in 6G without knowing where the revenue is going to.
I think the question I think is great. If I can take the first step on that one.
I'm still diagramming the question, but go ahead.
Yeah. No, here's a great question. So the answer is I think there will be an exponential increase initially with the demand of due to Gen AI mainly, and there are so many use cases which will push that. And the question is how much of that will land on the telco infrastructure. That's why I'm always trying to distinguish what's a real use case, right? Where do I truly need a 5G, 6G modem versus a fiber connected or Ethernet connected laptop or Wi-Fi, right? So we do have an inkling how much of that will end up on our infrastructure. So we will probably see a quite a substantial increase on over-the-top traffic over the next years. But then Gen AI offers also some new capabilities such as semantic compression and stuff like that, which helps us then to balance and equilibrate these capabilities as we go towards the end of this decade. Now, the first is driven by consumer demand, and the second is driven by industry ability to come up with new codecs and new compression techniques and new cloud infrastructure things. So we'll probably see something, I don't know which way it will go, but it will not continue growing like that. It will probably go like that or do something else, we don't know. So we'll see an inflection point at some point. Now, from a business point of view, there was just an announcement between T-Mo, NVIDIA, Nokia, Ericsson on building essentially a new capability around this Gen AI proposition. And I think we're probably, I don't have time to discuss this here on the panel, but there's new stuff coming with new ideas on how we could monetize AI as an asset.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think now the way to monetize, the first one is the barrier to entry to build private 5G networks. I think you hit on some of these as well. Needs to be lowered, right? Private 5G or 6G networks, being able to expand the ecosystem so it's not just a sliver of the industry who can deploy these things. Maybe not as easy as Wi-Fi, because that might be too easy, but get that sweet spot where you could still guarantee that resiliency and security of what you're building, but be able to get it built more across the enterprise. The other one for the operators, I think, the AI RAN Alliance, they love to test our usage of prepositions. They have AI for RAN, AI on RAN, AI in RAN, AI over the RAN, under the RAN. Well, anyways, they have an interesting concept there where, hey, I can host AI workloads on the same infrastructure where I'm running AI for the RAN. I believe that, and that's an interesting thing. Well, it awaits to be seen, because my opinion would be that ecosystem between the telcos and the cloud service providers have to come closer, because the telcos aren't going to beat the CSPs at that game. But it was interesting that they mentioned that. And then finally, I think monetizing more value for the operators themselves is trying to get that customization of a whole infrastructure for a particular customer or enterprise. So you see some of the tools being in there. It awaits to be seen if that'll be successful to create other revenue models. And what does that mean? It goes back to that network programmability, new types of devices. We talked about RIC and being able to do specific things maybe for my own requirements there. And I'm not saying that that'll definitely happen, but some of the tools are there to potentially create that opportunity.
All right, any other questions, or anyone want to weigh in on anything? Yes, sir.
I know. I was joking, yes. Just testing my preposition, it reminds me of 7th grade English or something.
Now, the question was about, so you talk about mental programmability and APIs and the relationship with the rating, et cetera. And I was curious, so I think, that to really potentially enable new revenue streams for operators, you probably need to have programmability in terms of not only interacting with the control plane of the network, but also being able to interact with the user plane. I was curious if anybody had idea of whether it's realistic to think that programmability, the interaction with the user plane is going to happen in years to come, and what would be the implications of that?
So he's wondering, just so that we can repeat the question, so how programmable can these networks really be? Can we get to the user plane and make that programmable in addition to the control plane, the data plane?
Yeah, I don't know what your thoughts are, because
My thought, we had that proposition in SDN. It's been swirling around for 20 years.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great concept, and you'll be shocked by the market stats. It's only, I think, 17%, so less than 20% of the world's networks are SDN enabled. So it's surprisingly low, and I think maybe Stuart has better data on that one, but it is surprisingly low for the billions or hundreds of billions of dollars we try to get into this open SDN standard. So there needs to be a really justifiable business case on why we should start touching the user plane per se. Well, we're doing it indirectly already through Open RAN and some 3GPP mechanisms on the UPF and all that. But if you want to go beyond that, I think you need to really justify that.
So I would say that in an enterprise context, SDN is very attractive, but belongs to a broader category of things that people are doing.
Yeah.
Analytics on user plane data, inferences from traffic. Most of that, in the way that even we would deploy a private cellular network today, is completely separate from what an enterprise has visibility of in their fixed and Wi-Fi networks. And it's sort of extracting the UPF from the rest of the core and making that more native to internet traffic that's already moving within the network, so that you can apply the tools that you already invested a decade in standardizing to them, I think would be very useful. I wanted to come back to the monetization of AI, which I'm an arms dealer in that. Historically, I think no one's ever going to make money off of the services that are built on top of that because. But they're going to need a lot more servers and a lot more processors and a lot more stuff that we sell, so go for it, absolutely. But I think there is an area where, and maybe this comes back to the simplification, actually Tyrell first raised the simplification of deployment question. It's not so simple to deploy a good Wi-Fi network. It's easy, I know you can plug in the modem at home, right? But in like we just finished a deployment of 6 gigahertz at, I can't even name it, at a big stadium in the southeast. And
Probably named after a telco, funny enough. But
actually,
anyway.
this one exceptionally not, but it doesn't matter. I had to send a team of like 20 people there for 3 weeks to figure out what the differences, which are subtle, between where the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi was deployed and where the 6 gigahertz Wi-Fi is deployed, and what's going to happen when it's under people's seats, and there's all sorts of sources. Blah, blah, blah. Automating that process more and applying the machine learning algorithms, blah, 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 which it's all just software, right? So it's not magic. To that problem, I think is really important and helpful. So I can see us as a consumer of this technology finding a lot of outlets for it. And we monetize it through not having to pay people salaries, right? No one's going to pay us more, so we have to pay somebody less.
Right. That's a big concern with all new technologies, right? Especially as AI is taking hold. Let's quickly talk about kind of the network operator's business model a little bit. So, the one thing that 5G did do, or is doing in the process of doing, is moving them to become more, I guess, cloud-enabled enterprises, maybe more AI-driven themselves, because, as 5G first was introduced, I think they were sort of hampered by the fact that a lot of their back office systems, their billing systems, things like that, were still in, from a different generation and were, kind of a mess. But as they are sort of changing as enterprises themselves, how do you think that 6G's capabilities will help them maybe find new ways to deliver services or new business models within the network operator?
I guess it's,
Yeah, you could
start with me again. I did want to mention one thing. A lot of the concepts that we see with 5G moving into 6G just seem like resurrection of other concepts like SDN. When we first started talking about disaggregation of the software, I was like, wait a second, this is ODL all over again.
Yes.
Network programmability. Didn't we have InServe like 40 years ago? But it's yeah, but it's now that it has evolved to more mature things and applying it to the cellular and mobile ecosystem. But nevertheless, I think that for the carriers, it goes back to, I look at 6G, I talked about the devices, right? And then there's also gaining more value out of the network and then making more efficient operations, I think, which is where they'll be able to get even more value. So that's AI for the RAN, spectrum sharing, which hopefully can be integrated into some of the standards there to allow for more efficient and broader use of spectrum. And then even things like RIC and some of the functionality that could be provided there that can make more efficient uses of resources, make the network not only more sustainable for environmental purposes, but to lower that OpEx and hopefully be able to draw more value out of the network.
So I like to look at the profit and loss. So P&L and cash flow is all what matters. Anybody who's run a company in this room knows that. And if you look at the P&L, the loss one, we start there, right? So Chris actually mentioned it all. I think, particularly AI probably can help to improve efficiencies, save some costs in the network with deployment, make better use of the interface, which is the biggest asset of the operator. So that's on the L side of the P&L. Now, what about the P side, right? And this is, I think, what Ken actually was trying to drive at, right? So that we as an engineering community, we're very good in optimizing the losses, but we're not so good in building value on top of what we have done actually. And I think that needs to be done up front in 6G. Completely agree with you, Ken, on that one. So what is the big P item I personally see, and I think, Bertie, our CEO, sees it as well, is that platform thinking, right? So we have talked about this for a very long time, but we finally put a stake in the ground by acquiring Vonage for $6 billion and said, hey, let's do this. Let's just get this industry into a new transformation, something where before we had industries not talking to each other at all, or we had a supplier relationship. Suddenly we're augmenting everybody into a partner relationship. So operators in the future will be able to partner with software providers, with the Googles of this world, and the long tail, all the app developers. And that is possible because we have automated API'd our networks. And I think this is one of the big master strokes of our modern time. We'll see whether it will pay out. We'll only see that at the end of this decade. But it's an important move because there's the last thing I want to say is, as an entrepreneur, you will have seen that, you will always save a few pennies and you will always make a lot of dollars on top. So the question is, where do we put our efforts now? We have a limited amount of resources, limited amount of people. Do we throw everybody in our engineering community now to tune the networks, tweak the networks and all that? Or do we sidetrack quite a bit of intellectual workforce on trying to figure out what's the business case? How can we make money? How can we introduce that financial proof point, which Jeff talked about, through differentiated networks and all that? So that's I leave you with that, right? So I'll leave you with that question, but my heart is, of course, with the top line opportunity rather than the bottom line saving.
Tyrell, you want to weigh in on?
Yeah, for us, we see like a typical 5G base station running one workload at the base station, and maybe you have your Gen AI that's somewhere in the cloud, and go into a data center somewhere. For 6G, we really see a convergence of bringing both of those workloads together and interacting to tap into a new creative solution. So we're building some foundational models that are really on the cutting edge of Gen AI and how that can add value to enterprises and also civil organizations and the Department of Defense.
Okay. Stuart, you not?
Yeah, so I just want to talk about something that you just mentioned, and it may not be what you meant, but it's what went off in my head.
Triggered something.
So I think that there is, and there has been for a while, an interest in moving more functionality to the cloud for greater efficiency, don't spend so much money at the edge, which tends to, well, first of all, it's hard to push that model down the throat of people who don't want it. But also, it runs counter to a lot of the things that we're promising about performance in local area networks, that they need to be more responsive, right, and not to go in these big loops up to the cloud. And I know, there are ways around that, but what I'm also starting to see is a big movement among some of our chip suppliers, for example, to put greater and greater processing capability and memory into the things that are on the very, very edge. So a G-Node B that can do a lot more than just be the bottom of the stack, but that can also start to process some of the data that's coming through that. And the challenge then, and this is a really interesting challenge, which I think companies like what you're doing are well placed, is figuring out how you coordinate all of those disaggregated sensor points and processing points into something that no individual one of them could know, but is true about the network.
Yes, that's spot on. That's exactly the problem set that we're looking at.
Interesting. We've got about 11 minutes or so left. Let's open it up for questions again. Does anyone have any question or discussion about network operator business models and how they might evolve or change as we're moving to 6G? Yes, over there. I don't know where the microphones are. If you just say it, I'll repeat it.
I will repeat it, yeah.
As long as it's succinct. How do you see the trade-off between radio access and the intelligence of the network happening in 6G? That's not really a business model thing, but we can kind of chew it over because it is important.
7.2 debates again out of RAN Alliance, but yeah.
Does anyone want to take that?
I have a very short answer to that, which is I don't think in the enterprise where I've tried to make this work, I don't think it's ever going to work that we're going to want to, that it's going to be more efficient to put more of the access stratum into a centralized location. I want it all in one box on the edge.
Okay.
So now you can do your disaggregation stuff.
Yeah. Right back there, I see a hand. The light's getting me, so I can't see who it is. Or go ahead. Okay, so to repeat the question, I guess we'd say how do you think 6G is going to manifest itself in industries that haven't changed for a long time? And then when it does, as it does, how do we avoid overestimating the benefits of that you know, to those. And she cited oil and gas and fishing and something else. Just traditional, yeah, okay, industries.
Well, I think the first thing that you would want to do is invite some farmers to one of these meetings.
Yeah.
And then you would get their perspective and realize how much, how vastly overestimated, even with the skepticism exhibited here. You don't have to, go and pull out 5 or 6 year old analyst reports. Sorry, I know there's some analysts here. And you'll see just that's absolutely positively true. And everything that we have said today underestimates the cost and overestimates the opportunity.
I think it's a great question, and it happens every generation. And I want to give a shameless plug to SJ from the NSF. He was, I think, 2 panels earlier on stage, and he mentioned that the NSF currently has a pot of money where they're trying to bring exactly supply and demand together to carve out these propositions. I think we need more of that at higher velocity and higher density, because that's the only way to get around that fallacy.
The NSF's also funding a number of wireless test beds where you can test applications, equipment, and they're open, and you can go to these test beds and see what works, and how it works, and actually get something more than a theory, so it can help with that for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, we have the notion of developing use cases that show how you are leveraging the technology. I think someone before said, hey, customers aren't going to be purchasing the latest waveform that's defined in 6G. They wanted to purchase solutions, right? So you said it before, bringing the farmers here, although I don't think they'd want to come here, but sitting down with them and really talking through what the use case and how they're operating today, and understanding how technology could help them in the future. And the other thing is, I said before about low barrier to entry, this goes back to the discussion around devices. And if you're able to get a wider range of the types of devices, I think it's very interesting to me, some of the batteryless or low power devices that are becoming available. And all of a sudden, those can be deployed in different types of environments, and then hopefully integrated into the rest of the mobile application and smartphone device ecosystem, so that they could leverage that to improve their operations.
Okay. Yes, sir, go ahead. Right in the front here, and then I'll get to... Okay, so there's a plug for the NGA white paper. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
That's great.
In the back, was there one more? And then we'll kind of get to wrapping up.
Going to the next level, if we get enough spectrum.
Okay, the question was essentially whether you believe 6G is going to be another great step forward.
Well, it's divisible by 2, so
yeah,
as we said before, it is, right?
Right. So I think let's go ahead and wrap up with a quick round of plugs. So here's what we'll do. Hold your applause. We're still on the panel. We got 3 minutes left. Very quickly, plug one thing you're involved in. Plug one thing you're not involved in to offset the ego karma. Chris, we'll start with you.
The plug, one thing that we're involved in, we, like others in this room, have participated in some of the major government-led efforts to push innovation in 5G and then 6G. Things like the Future G program, the NTI NOFOs, Microelectronics Commons, and others. And I really just wanted to plug all of the efforts that have been made through those programs to really spur innovation in the industry. We could sit here and say, oh, that wasn't good, that was good, whatever. But I think it's really been great to get that investment, get industry sort of moving forward, first with 5G and then hopefully now into 6G. And hopefully there are lessons learned in those programs so we could apply them for the future. Plug that I'm not involved in,
Something
but
you had nothing to do
not
with,
5G or 6G related. I am a New York Yankees fan, so hopefully they will close down their magic number of 1 tomorrow and win the East Division.
Okay.
And I'm a Washington football fan,
Okay.
and which is hard to admit these days, but they're
right.
playing tonight.
You'll be fine.
And hopefully they will win.
Okay, Misha, go ahead.
All right, things we're not involved in, but which completely geek me out is in how we get large language models onto our smartphones. That's happening right now.
Right.
We'll completely change the way I will search for information without networks even, right? So complete transformer. Things I'm involved in, 5G enabled robotic telesurgery. I've kind of pioneered that field when I was in London at King's College in London. Everybody back then thought it was a really lousy idea. God is very quick these days. We're bringing it to market. I'm working with the FDA, the White House, all the big surgeons in the United States and globally, and medical societies, all the robotic surgery companies will make it happen. As I say, just one life saved because of that, I can retire. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Tyrell, go ahead.
Yeah, one thing I'm not involved in that I like to bring to everyone's attention is the national STEM shortage. If you look at the National Academy of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, they recently released a report around STEM shortage. So I encourage everyone as an industry to really tap into both the domestic and international so we can cultivate the industry that we want for 6G. Tom had mentioned earlier, it feels like a little bit of black magic when we're talking about RF. So let's try to make that simple for future engineers. One thing that I am involved in, we're getting ready for Mobile World Congress in Las Vegas. We'll be showcasing our 6G integrated sensing capabilities. So please stop by our booth to see it in real time.
Okay, Stuart, last minutes for you.
Yeah, so one thing I am involved in, I'm going to try not to make this too technical, is unlicensed spectrum. As I mentioned earlier, we just got 1.2 gigahertz of unlicensed spectrum in the United States. Thank you to the FCC, former director, current director, all the people who work in OET. It was a phenomenal thing and took a long time to get. We only have half that much in Europe. We have the lower 6 gigahertz band, and there's a battle going on to figure out under what conditions we can get access to the whole of it. It sounds like we're being super greedy. 1.2 gigahertz of spectrum is obviously a lot of spectrum, but Wi-Fi networks are organized differently than cellular networks. And I'll just give an example of the Chase Arena in San Francisco. They have a 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi network, and they were only able to have 20 megahertz wide channels because they need to serve 40 or 60,000 people who are there, and those are very dense networks, and they all have to be a certain distance away from each other. So they were basically operating with 10-year-old Wi-Fi up until 6 months ago. Now they're able to operate 80 megahertz of spectrums. The UK, German, French stadia cannot do that. Getting half of that spectrum does not allow them to make that leap. So basically, in America, you go to a stadium, you get the same Wi-Fi performance as you get at home. You go to Wembley or Wimbledon, whatever, you get like what you would get at home 10 years ago. So that's the thing I am involved in. What I'm not involved in, there are these great organizations. One of them is in the San Francisco Bay Area called, this one happens to be called the Blue Water Foundation, where they take kids who've never seen the ocean, and a lot of them who are in juvenile correctional systems, and bring them out to a big boat on the water and take them for a day. This is a great thing. If any of you know how to sail, find out where your local one is and volunteer, because the kids just love it.
Excellent. And with that, thanks to the panel. Appreciate it.